Which books belong on the top shelf of your apologetics library? I'm Gary Michuta, and welcome to Top Shelf Book Recommend, where you get to peek at which books populate the top shelf of my apologetics library. Our book recommend for today is The Case for Jesus, The Biblical and Historical Evidence for Christ, written by Brant Pitre and published by Image Books. Now, many of you may already be familiar with Dr. Pitre's other works. He's done an awful lot of work, both on the popular level and the academic level, in New Testament studies. His most popular work, I believe, is Jesus and the Jewish Roots of the Eucharist, Unlocking the Secrets to the Last Supper. Also, Jesus the Bridegroom, the greatest love story ever told. What makes this book so interesting is that I think most people wouldn't associate Brant Pitre with historic Jesus research, which is what makes this book so intriguing and valuable, because it's not your typical treatment of the subject. Brant Pitre's approach is a bit unique, but I think it's quite solid. He begins by sharing a story about how, as an undergrad, some of his professors propounded ideas that caused him to doubt his faith, and how once he began his doctoral studies, he realized that these claims were utterly baseless. Now, the book's main thrust, although it is by no means the only facet of Brant's overall argument, deals with the supposed anonymous gospels that has been propounded by people like Bart Ehrman. The anonymous gospel theory essentially is an attack on the authenticity of the Gospels by arguing that the earliest copies of the Gospels didn't have any attribution to their respective authors. Therefore, it is argued that later Christians affixed certain names to these Gospels so as to give them authority, but these attributions were little more than legendary. Pitre offers several layers of arguments that show that this theory, although it's widely held in some circles, is utterly and totally baseless. He looks at internal evidence, he looks at manuscript evidence, he looks at patristic evidence, he looks at anti-Christian evidence, and he even does something great. He contrasts the Gospels with known pseudepigraphic Gospels and really shows that there's no comparison. Pitre also dives briefly into the issue of the Gospels as ancient biographies. Now, for those who are familiar with this field, you'll know this is a well-trodden issue in historic Jesus research. And I think Pitre does a fine job of treating this topic in a way that's not technical, yet nevertheless academically solid. He also devotes 2 chapters to dating and source theories. Both I thought were very good. The rest of the book, Pitre moves into the arena of the Hebrew Christ and the claims of Christ's divinity, specifically whether the synoptic Gospels present Jesus as divine. Pitre's defense that the Gospels did portray Jesus as divine is certainly worth reading. He focuses his attention on the synoptics' treatment of Jesus as the Son of God coming in the clouds, the calming of the water, and Christ's appearance on the Mount of Transfiguration. And Pitre does a very good job flushing out the Old Testament background to these episodes, and convincingly shows that the Synoptic Gospels did indeed understand Jesus to be God. He also briefly treats passages concerning Jesus' preexistence, the crucifixion, the resurrection, and Jesus' post-resurrection appearances. Now, he handles these topics by way of exegesis. And that's very different than how you see these topics treated by others. For example, the arguments found in some of Dr. Gary Habermas's work. And for this reason, I think that Pitre's work does a very nice job complementing the other treatments like Habermas. For this reason, I think Brant Pitre's book is a good pick for anyone interested in Christian apologetics. I think it's accessible to the beginner and helpful for those who are already familiar with the area of historic Jesus research. It's well deserving of a place on everybody's top shelf in their apologetics library. And I'm Gary Michuta, and thank you so much for watching.